So we'll start off by getting into understanding the pipelines, how government or industry and foundation, they prioritize the pipeline, what comes in their portfolio, especially with multiple vaccine concepts and candidates at different stage of development. I think it's key to understand how these concepts are prioritized or the research activities are prioritized for funding.
The last time I was at boot camp was when I was inducted into the U.S. Army. I hope this is a more pleasant experience. For industry, portfolio management is absolutely critical. It's one of the most important things we do because even though we may have, as a whole in industry, for a company, a $2 or even $4 billion budget for research and development, there's a lot of fighting for those dollars. Medical need is the primary consideration for considering a potential target. If there isn't a big medical need, it's just not going to be on the table. It's the ultimate justification for resource allocation. The other thing about medical need is that it motivates everyone in the company. When you're working on important projects that everybody can see the need for it. For example, when Janssen decided to contribute $200 million to the Ebola effort, everybody in the company was completely motivated by the fact that we were devoting so much effort to something that could become a worldwide threat and that we were making our contribution. And ultimately, it does determine the size and value of the market because something where a lot of people have a serious disease or a small number of people have an unmet need, that determines market size. All companies have different vaccine business models. What do I mean by that? Well, some companies have a comprehensive vaccine business model. For example, GSK, Merck, and Sanofi, and the Merck-Sanofi joint venture are an example of having a vaccine business model that is comprehensive. In other words, they want to have an entire portfolio of vaccines so that when their representative goes into the doctor's office or goes to the Minister of Health or the ACIP, they represent a broad vaccine company. Then there's a business model of focusing on large opportunities. Pfizer is a very good example where they have one vaccine really in the market, but it's a very big one, $2 billion or more a year. Then the third vaccine business model, and we're going to hear a lot more of this on the last talk, is contribution to the developing world. This may be part of your business model in the sense that you feel that it's an essential part of your corporate social responsibility, or it is an entree into markets that aren't interested in your drugs as much as your vaccines at this point because that's what they need. Every major vaccine company, regardless of their business model, has certain platforms that they're familiar with. Platforms include vaccine delivery, coupled to manufacturing and analytic expertise. For example, if you're like Merck, or Sanofi, you're a live viral vaccine company. You have expertise on dealing with live viruses. You know how to grow them. You know how to make master seeds. You know how to manufacture them. You have the containment and the expertise. And most importantly, you know how to analyze them. For example, GSK spent 20 years or more developing their adjuvants, and now those adjuvants are the leading ones in the field now. That's a platform for them. This is the mathematical financial tool that's used to compare different products within the company so that a calculation is made, and if the NPV is positive, then maybe you should go forward. And then how much positive it is determines whether you get your project versus some other project. So this is a tool for portfolio management. If that comes out to be negative, it's not likely you're going to do the project. Now, this is a very imprecise tool, but it's what's used in industry to do this kind of portfolio management. And everybody struggles to have positive NPVs and drive the cost of development down and try and be enthusiastic about the market potential. You may have a great product with a positive NPV, But if there's already other products going down the pipeline that have also got, they're not going to stop those projects, because as a project rolls along, its probability of success gets higher and higher. Early on, a project has maybe a 20% probability of success at the most, maybe 25. And something in the pipeline that's already passed proof of principle maybe has a 60% probability of success. Their NPVs are going to be much higher than yours, and so you won't get them to stop that project for yours, even if it is positive and even if it fits portfolio and so on. This is an important factor people don't recognize. But the NPV is important, but it's not the only consideration. I told you there's other considerations that I mentioned before. But you can see that it's not simple, but certain things are critical. If it fits in your portfolio, if there is a great medical need, if the NPV is positive, and if senior management is accepting or not opposed to it, it's likely to go forward.
I get the question a lot about why we, how we decide what diseases that we work on. You know, who do you even go to talk to about getting support within the foundation? It's not rocket science. It's quite simple. You just look at the top 10 causes of death in low-income countries. This is from WHO in 2012. You see lower respiratory tract infections leading the way, with HIV/AIDS a close second, diarrheal diseases. Then we have our chronic diseases, stroke, ischemic heart disease, malaria, preterm birth, TB. So the co-chairs have basically said, we want to focus on those infectious diseases that are the leading causes of death, quite simply. And so that is how we came up with the disease strategy teams that we have, and that's why we're focusing on what we're focusing on. So the simple rules then for how we look at our vaccine portfolio and prioritize the budget envelope for each of those areas. We do, first of all, consider disease burden, as I just alluded to. We also look at the probability of success of vaccines for intervening for that particular disease. Cost effectiveness is also an important component, as I just alluded to. And then the co-chair interests. I mean, for example, Melinda has really brought forward the cause of women and girls and looking at things like HPV and cervical cancer and how can we really get the delivery and coverage rates up for HPV vaccine. There's actually a whole portfolio of vaccines based on different platforms within each of these areas. In fact, when I came to the foundation, I was somewhat taken aback to learn that we were supporting partners with technology platforms for 9 different technology platforms, from live virals to vectors to conjugates to protein-based vaccines, et cetera. Typical company has 3 to 4 that they specialize in. So to be looking at 9 different technology platforms, that's huge. And you know, one of our thoughts has been, can we get more focus? Because where you really get the bang for your buck is expertise in a given platform and building on that expertise with product after product. So really thinking about that and really thinking about our partnerships that way and setting up actually our CMC manufacturing network with a focus on platform and not just on antigen. That's a really important concept. So thinking about then the HIV vaccine portfolio specifically, the simple rules there are, first of all, the foundation is really looking for vaccines that address a novel or unique hypothesis regarding the immune response. We're also looking for things that have the potential to be transformational. Certainly, we look at probability of success. The other thing that may not be apparent to all, but that is really important to us, is we want to have funding for things that are orthogonal to what others are funding. We don't want just to duplicate what others are doing, but we actually want to be synergistic and actually catalytic to the field. And then I would say there's also sometimes just programs that are of special interest, you know, either to our co-chairs, to Emilio as the new director for HIV program, et cetera. And so those factor in as well.
We also want to invest in those things that may be very high risk, that would have a very low probability of success, but the potential for impact is very high and transformational. So it's not just, looking at the portfolio and doing the math, but it's also looking at the balance of the portfolio and making sure that we're also investing in those things that have the potential to be transformational, that industry can't invest in and that we can help NIH with. I mean, that's the idea.
Our mission is to develop a safe and effective prophylactic HIV vaccine. It's pretty simple. And the way we do that is by supporting a portfolio that includes preclinical, translational, and clinical research. We promote discovery. We hopefully promote the discovery of novel vaccine candidates and strategies. In the preclinical area, one long-range goal is obviously to develop a predictive animal model of immune response. And also, the holy grail, how do we induce broadly neutralizing antibodies? Can those protect? Actually, that's an important question we're trying to address now. In the translational area, we're focusing on, what analytics are important for protein immunogen effectiveness. Can these immunogens be manufactured? Moving into the clinical area, we, of course, design and conduct phase 1, 2, 3 trials, obviously with a focus on studying correlates should there be any evidence of protection. We are also moving into, obviously, outside the typical areas of humoral and cellular immunity, focusing more a little bit into the mucosal areas and innate responses. And then also within our clinical branch, they do work on behavioral and social factors in prevention and transmission, and then trying to actively integrate clinical research with basic and preclinical and non-human primate investigators. As you might expect, we try to use science and data-driven decision-making for portfolio management. We rely heavily on the peer review system. We start out often, as I mentioned, with basic and innovative high-risk type concepts. These concepts can grow into platforms and vaccine candidates. We're incorporating more and more a staged approach with milestone-driven processes. And then the bottom line, as I like to say, which is not very scientific, is that Darwinian forces do come into play because, the stronger candidates will emerge with compelling data as we move through the small animals into primates. And then we need to consider manufacturability, feasibility, and analytics, of course, and ultimately with a defensible rationale to test in humans.
Integration is important because vaccine development for certain global health vaccines faces multiple challenges. And these challenges are mostly addressed within partnerships rather than within individual entities or organizations. So the slide here just presents some of the examples for those challenges, and you can see that there are challenges related to innovation. For instance, the need for that illuminating idea or discovery. Challenges could be associated with vaccine formulation. For instance, the need of certain platform, the need for certain adjuvant. Challenges could be related to clinical development, which encompasses a broad spectrum of things, including, for instance, budgetary challenges, operational challenges, community public perception challenges. And then, particularly for industries, the challenge of a poor anticipated return on investment from some of these targeted diseases. So, as a result, the vaccine development targeting many of these diseases, including HIV, generally occurs within partnerships, because within partnerships you get added and synergy values and skills, but at the same time you get share risks and benefits. The portfolios within partnerships are focused more than comprehensive. The portfolios within a partnership are limited in terms of number of candidates evaluated, because usually what is tried is basically to leverage one or a few promising candidates towards licensure for timely public health impact. So, I think that at least the majority of the partnerships and the portfolios within partnerships are related to candidates and concepts that are relatively advanced in development, that have certainly, higher probability of success than concepts that are very, very early. You can see that partnership portfolios generally have short life, because generally it's related to the life of the partnership. And for partnerships, once milestones are reached, whether successful or they're failed, then that might be the end of that partnership. Portfolios within partnerships are highly fluid. And this is dictated by frequent changes in partner composition, governance within the partnership, governance within the individual partners. And as a result, what might seem to be a very robust portfolio today might not be seen as a robust portfolio tomorrow. What things are common to the three types of entities? And that's what generally drives the portfolios within partnerships. You have to have common visions, common goals. Generally, the common goal is built around an agreement on a medical need and an agreement of a very important disease burden that has to be tackled. And then from that, the probability of success always is going to be determining whether a particular concept or candidate is put into a portfolio, assessed, maybe then removed and replaced by other. That's what would happen, but it's a fluid element. It changes over time. And these other factors, which are important within each of the individual entities, become also very important within the partnership. So the partnership might have, in and of itself, champions for particular concepts or particular candidates. And depending on the approach that the partnership is taking towards deployment to the field, a particular component of portfolio might be important as a gate opener.
So Carlos mentioned a key concept, which I think all of you alluded to a little bit with different language, and that was trying to assess the probability of success as a key criteria for what moves forward in the portfolios. And to some extent, the panel is quite nice because it represents quite a spectrum of different approaches, from a very industry-like approach to governmental or non-governmental approaches. But to some extent, what I think a lot of you are describing are late-stage concepts. Obviously, the type of probability of success may change, as particularly in the HIV field, we see the impact of other intervention technology, treatment for prevention, PrEP, microbicides. All of those will come on stream, and the level of incidence is likely to fall. Not fall enough to mean that a vaccine is not needed. But when you look forward and you're thinking about portfolio management, how do you see the bar for probability of success changing in the next 5 to 10 years?
For HIV vaccines, it's clear that probability of ultimate success is related to what's happening in the field. Because as other interventions come to the field, it's going to become more and more difficult to demonstrate that whatever solution you're bringing is having an added benefit to whatever is already deployed to the field. So it's I think, one of the reasons why it's important to try to move as fast as possible.
Just to take a step back, I mean, and think about it very pragmatically, I mean, as new interventions come on the scene and are proven to have some level of effectiveness, be it modest or large, that needs to be taken into consideration for the strategy moving forward. So at the foundation, we actually revisit our strategies for all the disease areas every year, and exactly taking into account what are the new data, how do we need to shift based on that new data. And as I said, the disease teams are actually focused on all the interventions that would be needed for a given disease to reach our goals for that disease, be it drugs, vaccines, et cetera. That said, with vaccines, we know that development is a long process. And, you know, with vaccine development, you can't constantly be shifting the goals. We really have to think about and focus on what are the most likely immunologic mechanisms that could actually achieve success against a given disease, be it HIV, et cetera, and try to really stick through and push through development and find actually more ways to efficiently do development and improve the speed of development so that we can get the answers that we need.
Now, one thing in vaccines that's the single most important factor, aside from the stage of development, and notice we already have proof of concept, is whether or not you have a surrogate or correlative immunity. That's so critical for vaccines. Developing a correlate is probably the single most important thing that can be done, and that's why NIH emphasizes that so much. And that's why their phase 2 trials cost $80 million rather than $8 million. Because they're, no, seriously, because they're powered in order to make sure that a correlate will come out of it if there's a hint of immunity, and there's an enormous effort on looking at those correlates. In industry, we can't do that. We cannot do studies that determine correlates the way NIH can, because it's not efficient, and our NPVs would become drastically negative. That's one of the reasons why in industry we seek partnership in HIV as opposed to some other diseases where you have a pretty good idea what we're doing and we can do it on our own.
We are always interested in partnering with people. We are happy to partner. We are happy to co-fund. We're happy to partner at any level, realizing that we don't have all the pieces that are needed, and that we can just do part of the job.
One of the things I love about working at the foundation is the variety of partners that we have. We truly partner with, you know, everyone, academia to industry to governments, NIH, et cetera. So it's a really exciting place to be with respect to that. On the NIH side, certainly on the HIV front, I mean, NIH, their contribution to the HIV field, you know, it just makes ours look like a little peanut, I think. And, you know, it's incredible. And so what we really want to do is to work with NIH to say, you know, where are the gaps and where can we fill in? Where can we bring something to the table that can be synergistic to what is already moving forward? With respect to industry, we have several ways that we collaborate with industry. One of the things that Carlos alluded to in his presentation is the vaccine discovery partnership. So we have those now with Sanofi, with GSK, and with Merck, and where we actually sit down and look like in you know, an overarching way, what are we working on, where are the synergies, how can we work more closely together. And then also with industry, we work on a product-by-product basis where we may, you know, help to fund development, and, you know, in return for that, there's global access agreements so that we can, our developing countries can have access to that vaccine at an affordable price. Just a couple of examples, but we work with both government and industry in multiple areas.
One thing I'd just like to point out in terms of these partnerships between industry and government and foundations and universities even, is that the one thing that industry can provide that these partners can't provide is late-stage manufacturing and process development. Now, what the partners provide is clinical expertise, the novel concepts, the early constructs, everything really, from the basic idea and proof of concept in animals all the way through phase 1 and 2 that we can do in partnership or come in later, and the clinical sites. So that's a lot. And they also provide something else. I told you that these NPVs for HIV vaccines in early stage, because there's no proven surrogate, are extremely low, maybe 20%. That wouldn't make a positive NPV unless government foundations provide money. But they provide the money for doing the process development in the early stage, provide the money for the animal studies and all those things, so that there's a real need in HIV, in my view, to have these partnerships, and they're absolutely, from an industrial point of view, essential to even have interest in HIV, because without it, I just don't think industry would be interested.